I'm really glad to be here this morning in this wonderful sunny morning in Thessaloniki with all dear friends from before. We've been meeting the last 3 years, and this has been extremely beneficial especially to someone like me, who in the meantime has decided to move to politics and kind of implement part of our thinking into the real life of politics. Congratulations to all the partners, and especially to our generous host, Nikos Zacharis and Alexandra Prodromidou, and the big absentee, Pavlos Gassis, who decided to migrate himself to Canada in the meantime to seek a better life. As I was listening to my colleagues this morning, I came with a radical idea. A radical idea came to my mind, how beneficial it would be to have you, Dimitris and Zoran, to the Greek Parliament, to the committee, and speak to us about these issues. Parliament, especially the Greek parliaments, are not very good with PowerPoints. The tradition is just to speak and speak and speak. As soon as I go back to Athens, I will have a meeting with the chairman, the president of the parliament, and suggest the radical idea that we have to open up to the academia and to learn more and to have the facts right before we speak about these very difficult issues. So after the thank you, let me go through my bullet points. Of course, we will continue the conversation tomorrow as well, where we have the big Symposium on International Affairs in Olympian just across at 11 o'clock, and we will have both the current commissioner responsible for migration, Dimitris Avramopoulos, and the new vice president of the commission, overall responsible for the topic, Margaritis Chinas. As you know, the dysfunctionality of EU is such that the Commission is not to take over on November 1st as it was scheduled. It will have to wait, nobody knows how much, but eventually Margaritis will be the Vice President. And so we will have them both tomorrow to question them and to have an interesting discussion. Some of our speakers today will be speaking tomorrow as well, right? So, now, 5-6 main points. The arguments and my thinking on the making and making of Europe vis-à-vis migration crisis is eloquently written and published in this handy volume here. So I'm not gonna read you what I wrote a year ago, although I do stand by every single word, and I think it continues to be as timely as it was a year ago. So I urge you to get a copy of this compilation, this collection, as you exit, and to read all the colleagues' contributions. I would just try to speak to you and give you the big picture as I see it, as much as I can. First, this is a topic that is with us today and will stay with us for the foreseeable future. And this is a topic that has been very, how should I put it, poisonous for the public discourse. It is one of the topics where the gap between academia and politics is the widest. I cannot think of other topics, public policy topics, maybe political Islam was such a matter, where what the experts think and believe and what the public and the politicians claim are in such big divergence. And for me, this is particularly struggling as I try to bridge the divide and the gap between the two, me being primarily a professor, but currently a politician. And it's an interesting tension. It is one of those few I mean, there are many topics, but one of the topics where facts and fake news and statistics and numbers and stereotypes kind of all mix together and create an explosive mixture, very susceptible to the exploitation of populists and extremists and people destined to do more harm than good. However, I would claim, and this is my second point, that the gap, for the gap between academia and politics, it's responsible, it's not only the politicians, and as populist as they are, and in a sense they have to be, because their job is to represent up to a certain point the people. Responsible is also the academia, and I have to share with you my frustration with many of my academic colleagues, maybe because I come from Pandion, the frustration is bigger, but people don't know what I'm talking about. And here I would advise you to come and read some wonderful research, especially an eye-opening for me was the one published by Paul Collier, a famous Oxford-based World Bank economist who has written a wonderful study, very upsetting for the idealists and the humanitarianists of this world about immigration. Who benefits from it? Is it a selfish act? What is the harm done to the society of origin? Who benefits, etc., etc. Who hurts, who benefits? It's not as simple as sometimes we tend to think. So Paul Collier, C-O-L-L-I-E-R. Read it, and it will change your perspective to immigration. And by the way, the problem is not just the numbers themselves. The problem is the cascading effect that it creates, and the fact that we have a dynamic that, if left unmanaged, will become unmanageable at the end. So this is another point, number 2. Point number 3. Since May, the numbers have started increasing again here in Greece. The Eastern Corridor is being revived. We have certain developments in the rest of the Mediterranean that are shifting the flows through Turkey. We had the mild sanctions on Turkey because of Cyprus on July 15th, and the instrumentalization of the refugee on the part of Erdogan. And so we have seen the flows increase by 200%, 300%, 400%. They are still much lower than during the crisis, as Dimitris mentioned, but they have increased far enough to ring the alarm bell here in Athens. And this is the #1 now priority of the new Greek government that took power on July 7th, just 3 months ago. And I will share with you the latest on opinion polls that while the government is very popular across the board, especially on economics and social politics, on the issue of the migration crisis, there is a huge problem. And if this persists, the government position will harden further still, both on the way it itself manages the flows and its stand on the European level as well. Yesterday we had the conclusion of the summit. The Greek Prime Minister forcefully and forcibly put the issue on the agenda, and it was included in the final communiqué of the summit. And we are, as a government, determined to make it an issue of European unity and solidarity. Europe needs to have a policy on the matter. It cannot continue to sleepwalk in this Pollyannesque kind of mode, deeply divided between East and West, between those former East Europeans who benefit the most from European integration, and yet they are negative in providing the minimum of solidarity, which Dimitris mentioned has not been fully appreciated, the schizophrenia of our position vis-à-vis Turkey. Because here is a country we seek its cooperation with us in order to minimize the damage, and yet we want to put sanction, for better or worse, against it for its behavior, misbehavior in Cyprus and elsewhere. So we have this very schizophrenic approach to Turkey. On the one hand, we need its cooperation. On the other hand, we want and we should, one might claim, as the videotape is running, reprimanded. And it's interesting how you calibrate a policy with someone you want to punish. We'll see. Now, for us liberal Europhiles, not only in Greece but everywhere, the migration crisis is the big hot benchmark. Because it will be the issue where our liberalism will stand or fall, in a way. Can you be a Europhile liberal in the midst of a migration crisis? Or will you subtract and backpedal the way Angela Merkel, for example, had to do, first losing Kurz, and then losing CSU, then losing the East Europeans, and then almost losing its own party in the process. So it's a very, very fundamental bet we need to win as we try to strive for a middle of the road. This is the Merkel-Macron-Mitsotakis middle of the road approach to how to handle the process, via media. Neither Tsipras nor Orban, to put it on Greek TV terms. We don't want closed borders, and we want to respect our international obligations. By the way, in the Greek context, something also that people don't always appreciate is not just international obligations, it's also the constitution. The Greek constitution, like the German constitution, has a clause that provides for the protection of freedom fighters, of those who are under attack for their fight for freedom worldwide. It's one of the celebratory claims of the post-junta new constitution of 1975. So we don't want closed borders. We do want the protection of refugees, but we don't want a country without borders where everybody can come in and do whatever, the way that certain, not the whole of Syriza, but at some later on, in the beginning, yes, but for sure, even to the very end, a large part of the hardcore the ideological core of the party used to believe. And so there are irregular migrants that need to be processed, scrutinized, checked, and returned back to their country of origin through, this is easier said than done, but nevertheless, that should be the effort through special programs. So here we are to win the bet, and to, which is a bet for the bet of mainstream politics, the bet of sanity, the bet of moving away from the polarization of the two extremes that threaten to destabilize European politics in general, with migration as the core issue, but with consequences for everything across the board. And so this is, in a sense, the fight of our generation, both as academics and as politicians or public intellectuals, opinion influencers in the larger public discourse. I had other things to say as well, but I see, Alexandra, about the connection between emigration and immigration, another argument that even Krastev has made time and again, and it's interesting that all our countries are in fear of replacement, not just the people who are coming, but the people who are coming and taking the place of the indigenous people. After all, these are nations, the North Macedonians or the, again I'll get in trouble, or the Bulgarians or the Romanians, that in Serbs for sure, that are and Greeks maybe, that are in decline, maybe in terminal decline, a pessimist might say, demographically speaking. And this complicates the handling of the issue. Thank you very much. I'm sure we will have chances to continue the dialogue, and we will continue the dialogue later on now today, and of course tomorrow as well, just across in the big room of Olympion. We will invite you for sure to Athens one of these days, and we will have this dialogue in front of parliamentarians, because I feel it's our obligation to base our policy on facts rather than on fantasies and ideologies and stereotypes that have nothing to do with reality. And reality is always here to take its revenge. It will take its revenge in Washington. It will take its revenge in Westminster. It took its revenge in Athens back in 2015, and it will continue, and eventually even in Ankara. Thank you.